Shalom, shalom. This is Brother Rush coming to you from the King James Bible University, and I'll be doing a short teaching for the worshiping of idols. For the worshiping of idols. But before we get started, I would like to make a public announcement. King James Bible University and the House of the Lost Sheep of Israel is an institution that stands alone. King James Bible University and the House of the Lost Sheep of Israel is not affiliated with no Christian organization or street camp of any sort. King James Bible University and the House of the Lost Sheep of Israel is an institution that holds strictly to the 1611 Sovereign King James Bible with the Apocrypha. Now back to the lesson. For the worshiping of idols. Idolatry is false worship. And let's see how this is moving in the spiritual dictionary. Graven image. Idolatry. False worship. Spiritual adultery. Idolatry is false worship, and false worship becomes spiritual adultery against Jehovah. It is not only the act of bowing before an image or a statue physically, it is spiritually when our spirit gives devotion, trust, and reverence to something created or man-made, other than giving that reverence and that obedience to Jehovah. Worship is where the Spirit places its loyalty, dependence, and obedience. When that devotion is directed towards created things instead of Jehovah, it becomes false worship. Our spirit was created to be joined to Jehovah alone. Trust in Him as our source of life. When something else occupies our spirit, now the heart has become easily open to committing spiritual adultery because it gives that devotion that belongs to Jehovah to something else for strength. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 14, and verses 27. For the worshiping of idols, not to be named, is the beginning, the cause, and the end of all evil. Idolatry is not just false worship, it is the root of spiritual corruption. In my spirit, when my trust shifts away from Jehovah, everything that flows from my spirit begins to change. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 14, verses 27, calls it the beginning of evil, because the moment my spirit depends on something other than Jehovah, my spirit is already out of line. If I depend on physical wealth, people, or visible security instead of Jehovah, then those things began to direct my thoughts, my decisions, and my desire. My spirit slowly starts to move according to that false peace, rather than to remain spiritually connected to Jehovah. Exodus chapter 6 and verses 3. And I appeared unto Abraham and unto Isaac and unto Jacob by the name And let's see in the spiritual dictionary. Name. Name means way. And I appeared unto Abraham, unto Isaac, and unto Jacob by the name, by the way of God Almighty, but by my name, by my way, Jehovah, was I not known to them. Jehovah's name is not just a name. It is about me walking in his way. The more I learn his commandments and his judgments and his guidance, the more I begin to understand his way and the path he has established for my life. Knowing Jehovah is not just about me speaking his name with my lips. It is allowing my spirit, my decisions, and my obedience to follow the way he has established for me. Exodus chapter 20 and verses 3. Thou shalt have no other God, small g, idol, before me. Jehovah is making it plain. Nothing, no person, possession, or visible things should take the place that belongs to Jehovah. If my strength, my comfort, security, or guidance come from something other than Jehovah, then that thing has become an idol, a God, before Jehovah in my spirit. This exposed something within me. It shows me that idolatry is not only about a statue or an image. It is about what my spirit places first in front of Jehovah. Whenever I depend on what I could see more than the one who created all things. Exodus chapter 32 and verses 1. And when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mount, the people gathered themselves together, and Aaron, and said unto him, Up, make us gods, idols, which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, bondage, we wrought not what is become of him. Idolatry begins when the desire of the heart loses patience with trust in Jehovah. The people had already seen Jehovah's power and his deliverance. Yet, when they could no longer see Moses before them, their faith weakened. Instead of waiting on Jehovah, their spirit desired something visible to lead them. Their request exposed that their trust had shifted from the unseen guidance of Jehovah to something their eyes could follow. Idolatry shows that our desire is replacing faith with physical sight. Our flesh struggles with trusting what we cannot see, so our spirit searches for something visible to rely on. When people ask for gods to go before them, they were seeking a form of leadership that would satisfy their spirit rather than trusting Jehovah, who had already shown his power. Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 8 and verses 2. And thou shalt remember all the ways in which the Lord thy God led thee these 40 years in the wilderness, to humble thee and to prove thee, to know what was in thine heart, rather thou wouldest keep his commandments or no. Jehovah allowed certain seasons in my life to humble me and to prove what was in my spirit. Humbling is when Jehovah brings my spirit to a place where my own strength and the things I relied on began to fail. When those support like family, friends, jobs, living conditions are removed, I began to see clearly that my spirit cannot be sustained by what I physically see. I am reminded that my true strength was always meant to come from Jehovah. The proving is revealing of what is in my spirit. These trials expose, rather, my trust is truly in Jehovah, or rather, my spirit is still leaning on the things of my flesh. When the pressure comes, it shows me where my spirit dependency really lies. If my confidence was in people, possessions, or visible stability, those moments were revealed to me. Though these experiences, I've learned that Jehovah was not trying to destroy me. He was revealing what was in my spirit to me. The humbling showed me where I had placed my trust. Rather, my faith would remain with him. These moments were meant to turn my spirit, my desires away from false peace and bring my trust back to Jehovah alone. Romans chapter 1 and verses 25. Who changed the truth of God into a lie and worshiped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. When my spirit changes from the order that Jehovah established, Jehovah was meant to be the source of my spirit, the one I trusted, and the only one my spirit worshiped. But when that order becomes twisted, I began to depend on what was created instead of the one who created it. What should have remained first in my spirit became secondary, and the things that were only meant to be temporary started receiving the devotion that belonged to Jehovah. I realized that changing the truth into a lie happened within my spirit. When I treated created things as if they carried the power that belonged only to Jehovah, Instead of seeing people, wealth, or possessions as temporary provisions, my strength can easily begin to lean on them as though they are the source of my strength. In that moment, my spirit shifts away from Jehovah, and my spirit turns towards created things, man made. Rejection begins in my spirit before it appears in my behavior. The rejection to reject his statutes is slowly pushing away the order Jehovah established. It is when his instructions no longer guides my decisions and my own thoughts begins to take the lead. Once his statutes are set aside, my spirit does not stay empty. It goes, it's going to follow something else. Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 8. And verses 11. Beware that thou forget not the Lord thy God, in not keeping his commandments, and his judgments, and his statutes, which I command thee this day. There have been moments in my spirit when things were going well, when my work felt steady, my responsibilities seemed secure, and I felt confident in my plans I had made for myself. It was easier for me to depend on my own thinking instead of seeking the guidance of Jehovah. I still believed in him, but my trust was shifted towards my own understanding and my own ability to manage what was in front of me. I realized that this is one of the deceitful ways a person can begin to forget Jehovah. Not by openly denying him, but by living as though our spirit no longer need Jehovah's direction. The desire of the heart starts slowly beginning to rely on its own reasoning, replacing dependency that should only come from Jehovah alone. Deuteronomy chapter 8 and verses 13. And when thine herd and thy flock multiply, and thy silver and thy gold is multiplied, and all that thou hast is multiplied. My spirit can feel stable and secure in those moments because it's easy for my spirit to attach itself to the increase instead of remembering the one who allowed it. As things multiply around me, people, influence, resources, and stability, the flesh can begin to feel strong. That strength can easily move my trust away from Jehovah and place it in what I have gained. Instead of seeing those things as provision from Jehovah, my spirit begins to rely on them as though they are the source of life. Verse 14, Deuteronomy chapter 8, verses 14. Then thine heart be lifted up, and thou forgettest the Lord thy God, which brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. This is what can happen when my desires become lifted up, when the things begin to increase around me and my spirit feels secure. My heart can slowly begin to elevate itself. Instead of remaining humble and remembering the Lord who guided me, I can begin to feel as though the stability around my spirit came from my own strength. When that happens, my desire begins to drift away from the one who delivered me. Jehovah is the one that brought me out of Egypt, bondage. Being trapped in ignorance, sin, and dependence on things of the flesh. He is the one who guided my spirit out of those church buildings, out of that condition. But if my desire becomes lifted up through pride, success, or increase, I can begin to forget the very source that delivered me, Jehovah. Colossians chapter 3 and verses 5. Modify, therefore, your members, which are upon the earth: fornication, uncleanness, inordinance, affection, evil concupiscence, and covetousness, which is idolatry. Idolatry does not always appear outwardly. It often begins inside the desires of my own spirit. Covetousness starts when I begin craving something so much that it slowly takes the place that belongs to Jehovah. It may begin as a simple wanting, but when that desire starts controlling my thoughts, it begins to shape my decisions and my directions. Whatever my spirit longs for too long begins to govern me. When a desire grows to the point that I cannot be content without it, that desire has already began to occupy the place of my devotion that belongs to Jehovah. That is how idolatry forms in my spirit. When something is created, becomes the source of my focus and dependence instead of Jehovah. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 14 and verses 22. Moreover, this was not enough for them, that they erred in the knowledge of God, but were as they lived in great war of ignorance. Those so great plagues call they peace. I see how dangerous it is when my understanding of Jehovah becomes twisted. It shows me that a person can live in error and still believe everything is fine in his spirit. The people were not only lacking knowledge of Jehovah, they were living in ignorance, yet they call afflictions peace. Their confusion had become normal to them. I realize how easy it is for me to live in something that is actually harming my spirit while convincing myself that it is peace. If my understanding of Jehovah is replaced with my own imagination, traditions, or things I was taught without examining them, my spirit can drift away from truth without me even noticing it. This brought my spirit much clarity that ignorance creates a blindness that hides in my spirit. Outwardly, everything can appear calm, but inwardly, my spirit is unsettled because it is not grounded in the truth, the knowledge of Jehovah. What should be recognized as plague, confusion, false worship, and spiritual blindness can begin to feel normal, and that normal can be mistaken for peace. I sat in those church buildings for years thinking I had peace. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 14, and verses 23. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 14, and verses 23. And forthwith they slew their children in the sacrifice, or used secret ceremonies, or made reveling of strange rites. I see how far I can drift while my worship is no longer focused on Jehovah. Once the knowledge of Jehovah begins to fade in my understanding, going in and out of those church buildings, my spirit can start to replace truth with practice that came from customs passed down and traditions. What may begin as a small error in my spirit can grow into a desire that moves my spirit completely out of the order of Jehovah and what he has established. False worship never remains small in my life. It begins when my spirit turns away from Jehovah, seeking things that feeds the flesh. Secret practice, traditions, or custom that I once came up in that were never commanded can begin to take the place of obedience. Instead of honoring Jehovah, my spirit can slowly shift towards satisfaction, the desires of the flesh. Idolatry produces darkness because once the spirit becomes disconnected from truth, I can begin to justify the things that are harmful to my spirit. Practice that should be recognized as wicked, sinful, can start to appear normal. Corruption can become something that my desire tries to excuse or accept, knowing that it is wrong in my spirit and in the eyesight of Jehovah. Matthew chapter 6 and verses 21. For where your treasure is, there will your heart desire be also. My treasure reveals the direction of my spirit. The treasure is not only money or possessions, it can be knowledge, wealth, riches, influence, or anything my spirit values the most. Whatever I consider valuable naturally draws my attention and my focus, my desire begins to move towards the thing I treasure. If my treasure is worldly substance and material, wealth, or recognition, my spirit will continue to be guided by those things. But if my treasure is the knowledge and the wisdom that comes from Jehovah, then my desire begins to move towards life in the Spirit. Matthew chapter 13 and verses 44. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto the treasure hidden in a field, the which when a man has found, he hideth, and for joy thereof go and selleth all that he hath, and buyeth that field. When I truly recognize the value of the kingdom, once I discover that hidden treasure, everything else begins to lose its importance. The things I once thought were valuable, cars, boats, material possessions, no longer hold the same weight in my spirit. When I understand the worth, the worth of what I have found, I am willing to kill off, to let go of these desires of other things, because I realize that what Jehovah has revealed is far greater than anything I possess before me. True treasures change the directions of my spirit. When I began to value the wisdom and the knowledge of Jehovah, my priorities start to shift. Things that I once seemed important to me begins to lose their hope because my desire had discovered something greater. My spirit moves away from temporary things and began to focus on what had lasting value. Proverbs Proverbs chapter 3 and verses 5. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. My trust must rest fully in Jehovah, not in my own reasoning. My heart, my desire, and my spirit must depend on Jehovah as my true source of wisdom and guidance. When I lean on my own understanding, I began to rely on what I think, what I see, or what feels reasoning in my flesh. But my understanding is limited, and it can easily lead me away from the path Jehovah has set before me. Trusting in the Lord with all my desires is allowing the Spirit of God to guide my decisions. even when I do not fully see how things will unfold, recognizing that Jehovah's wisdom is greater than my own thoughts. True stability is in my walk. True stability in my walk does not come from my knowledge or my plans. It comes from trusting the guidance of Jehovah and allowing his wisdom to direct my spirit. Joshua chapter 24 and verses 15. And if it seems evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom ye will serve, rather the gods, the idols, which your fathers served, that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods, the idols of the Amorites, in whom the land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Jehovah is a decision I must make within my own desire. My spirit will always move in the direction of something, and my spirit will attach itself to whatever I trust and obey the most. I cannot remain stagnant because my choices, my actions, and my obedience will always reveal who I am truly serving. I see that the decision is placed before me every day. I must examine what guides my spirit. Rather, it is the wisdom of Jehovah or the desires of my flesh. The things I follow depend on, and the things that influence my decision show where my loyalty and my obedience truly rest. Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verses 5. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thine soul, and with all thy might. Promising the Lord with all my heart and with all my desire and with all my direction of my spirit must remain focused on Jehovah above everything else. Promising him with all my spirit and with all my breath should be the guidance by his wisdom alone. Ecclesiasticus Sirach, chapter 15 and verses 17. Before man is life and death, and whether him liketh shall be given him. Jehovah has already set the decision before me. Every day my thoughts my desires, and my obedience reveal what I am truly worshiping. If I place my trust in Jehovah, loving, promise Him with all my desires, and keeping my spirit devoted to Him, I am walking in the path of His Spirit. But if my heart begins to follow the desires of my flesh or depends on the things that were created, I am moving towards death, spiritual separation. Idolatry begins the moment my trust shifts away from Jehovah to another source of guidance. What pleases the flesh, but life begins when my spirit turns back to Jehovah as a true source of wisdom, strength, and guidance. So the choice continues to stand before me. What I treasure the most, what I trust, and what I obey will always reveal who truly guides my spirit. Matthews chapter 6 and verses 24. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon. My spirit cannot be divided between Jehovah and the things of this world. I came to the understanding that my spirit will always attach itself to one master. Whatever I depend on for security, guidance, and strength will eventually become the one I serve. If my spirit trust is in wealth, possessions, or visible things, those things will begin to guide my decisions and shape my desires. But when my trust remains in Jehovah, my spirit begins to move according to His wisdom and His order that shows me how to walk humble before Jehovah. Micah chapter 6 and verses 8. Micah chapter 6 and verses 8. He has shown thee, O man, what is good, and what doeth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. Jehovah has already made clear what He requires from me. The path is not hidden or complicated. He called me to do rightly. My obedience must be righteous, and my alignment with His commandment. He called me to love mercy. My spirit should carry the promise of compassion and patience towards others, the same way Jehovah has shown mercy to me, and He called me to walk humble, meek with Him. I must recognize that my spirit is guided by the wisdom of Jehovah, not by pride or my own understanding. There may be moments when I feel justified in responding with anger or pride, or when someone wrongs me. My flesh might want to prove a point or defend itself. But when I remember Jehovah's word, I realize that walking humble with Jehovah means choosing righteousness over pride. Instead of allowing my emotions to lead my spirit, I choose to act with obedience and mercy, remembering that Jehovah is guiding my steps. In those moments, my spirit reflects the humility and the obedience that Jehovah requires. Proverbs chapter 16 and verses 7. When a man's ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. When my ways are aligned with Jehovah, the condition of my spirit begins to change. Pleasing the Lord is when my spirit, my decisions, and my directions of my walk follow Jehovah's wisdom and his commandments. When my life is guided by his truth, I am no longer relying on my own strength to create peace around me. Even situations that once felt like oppositions or conflict can be calm when my walk is pleasing to Jehovah. My responsibility is to keep my spirit aligned with Jehovah. When my spirit remains devoted to him and my spirit follows his guidance, he is able to bring peace even where there was once hostility. Second Corinthians chapter 2 and verses 16. 2 Corinthians chapter 2 and verses 16. Second Corinthians chapter 6, and verses 16. And what agreement has the temple of God with idols? For ye are the temple of the living God. And as God has said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. The temple of God is not a structure made with hands. It is the place where the Spirit of the living God dwells, and that's my spirit must reflect that dwelling. If Jehovah chooses to dwell in me and walk in me, then my desires cannot make an agreement with idols. They cannot be placed They cannot be a place for Jehovah and a place for false devotion at the same time. My spirit must remain devoted to Jehovah alone. Ephesians chapter 4 and verses 4. There is one body and one spirit, even as ye are called in one hope of your calling. There is one body and one spirit, which is the truth, the true guidance of my spirit that comes from the one source, Jehovah. My calling is not divided between different paths or influence. It is focused on the Spirit of God that leads and gives life. My heart cannot attach itself to many sources of guidance. If there is one Spirit calling me, then my trust and my obedience must remain connected to that same Spirit. When I keep my devotion aligned with Jehovah, my spirit moves with the will and the purpose He has given me. But if my attention shifts towards other things, my walk begins to drift away from Him. The hope of that calling, my spirit must remain grounded in the one Spirit who called Jehovah. John chapter 4 and verses 24. God is a spirit, and they that worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth. My worship of Jehovah cannot be limited to outward situations or physical places made with hands, man's hands, because God is a spirit. My worship must come from my own spirit and be grounded in truth. It is not about words I speak, it is about the condition of my heart and the direction of my spirit. My devotion must come from within. Worship happens when my spirit remains connected to Jehovah through His wisdom and His guidance. If my heart begins to depend on physical things that are seen, wealth, comfort, recognition, or anything created, source, my worship becomes divided. But when my spirit remains devoted to Jehovah, what is seen outwardly about my spirit remains faithful to Jehovah in truth. Exodus chapter 34 and verses 14. For thou shalt worship no other God, for the Lord, all caps. Let's see this in the spiritual dictionary. all caps, the Spirit of God. For thou shalt worship no other gods, idols, for the Lord, all caps, the Spirit of God, whose name, way, is jealous, is a jealous God. My worship must remain faithful to Jehovah alone. Jehovah, he does not share the devotion that belongs to him with any created or man-made. My desire, my trust, and my obedience were meant to be directed towards Jehovah as the true source of life. When my spirit begins to placing my confidence or dependence in something created, rather possessions, people, or worldly comfort, I have shifted my devotion away from the one who gives my spirit life. Exodus chapter 20 and verses 5. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord, all caps, the Spirit of God, thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, upon the third and the fourth generation of them that hate me. My worship must belong to Jehovah alone. Bowing down and serving idols is not only about physical image, it is about what my spirit chooses to depend on and honor. If I begin to give my trust and my attention and my obedience to something created, then my spirit has already started bowing to that thing instead of remaining faithful to Jehovah. The choice I make in my belief can influence others who follow after me. The way I live, what I honor, and what I trust can shape those who continue beyond me. So I have to guard my faith carefully, making sure my trust and worship remains with Jehovah alone. Joshua chapter 24 and verses 23. Now therefore, put away, said he, the strange gods, the idols, which are among you, and incline your heart unto the Lord God of Israel. Removing the idols from my life begins with the directions of my heart. Strange gods are not always physical image. They can be anything my spirit began to trust in or depend on instead of Jehovah. If my heart attached itself to wealth, recognition, comfort, a car, boat, or anything created for security and guidance, those things become an idol within my spirit. When the scriptures said to put away the strange gods, it is calling me to examine what my heart has been leaning on, and to remove those misplaced devotion, to incline my desires unto the Spirit of God. I must turn my desires, my trust, and my devotion back towards Jehovah as my true source of life. The true worship begins when I redirect my spirit away from the things that competes for my trust and redirect my spirit from physical things that cannot give hope or direct my path that should only come from the source that gives my spirit life, Jehovah. Ecclesiasticus Sirach chapter 2 and verses 15. They that fear the Lord will not disobey his word, and they that love him will keep his ways. If my desires is truly towards Jehovah, my life will reflect the obedience of his word. The fear of the Lord is not just the desires in my spirit. It is a deep reverence that keeps my desire from turning away from his guidance. Idolatry begins when my desires shift towards something created or made with man's hands. But my faithfulness begins when my spirit returns and inclines towards Jehovah. If I truly desire him, I will guard his words and follow his ways. This is my desire, to please Jehovah for the rest of my life. This has been Brother Rush. Shalom and shalom.